All right, President Joe Biden yesterday alone issued 17 executive orders, and he's been wearing out the pen again today. Those orders ranging from mandating masks to changing the 2020 census to canceling the Keystone Pipeline. And unfortunately, he's just getting started. Joining me now to help us break all of this down and what we can expect from the Biden administration is Congressman James Comer. He represents the 1st Congressional District of Kentucky, and he also serves as the ranking member on the House Oversight Committee. Congressman, welcome back to the program.
It's great to be back.
So what do we know thus far on these executive orders? I think you've spoken out. I've seen some of the statements that you've put out. You're concerned about its impact upon small businesses and upon the economy.
You know, sadly, it looks like we've gone from an America First agenda to America Last agenda, because when you talk about what we need to get our economy going, we need jobs, and when he does things like cancels the Keystone Pipeline, that costs good-paying jobs. It also helps put us further behind our goal of being energy independent. He talks about joining the Paris Climate Accords. That is something that everyone knows puts us further behind China in trying to establish manufacturing superiority. And Biden talks about unity, but he does all these executive orders. He doesn't have any conversations with leaders in the Republican Party. He doesn't have any conversations with leaders in businesses who are drastically affected by these executive orders. And, you know, the media is going to continue to give him a free pass and talk about how wonderful and diverse his cabinet is. But as a member of Congress, as a conservative, as someone who's pro-business, as someone who really wants to see the economy recover, I think we've started off in the very wrong direction.
Well, let's look at some of these 17 just that we have from yesterday, more coming today. One that's very concerning is the census, the 2020 census in which that was conducted. He now wants to go back and change the way it was done in terms of illegal immigrants that are here in the country.
Right.
Wants to count them because that's going to benefit Democrats when it comes to redrawing these lines and based upon population and money again. I mean, how can you go back and do that post-census?
Well, the president was very clear, and I think the Republicans were very clear, and the majority of Americans were very clear. We don't feel like people who are in the United States illegally should be counted towards congressional reapportionment. And if you think about that, California has an estimated 2.2 million illegals living in California. That is 3 congressional districts. So if you didn't count the illegals for congressional reapportionment, that would be 3 less congressional seats that the state of California would have. Obviously, that's 3 more electoral votes for any Democrat running for governor. So it's not right to reward states like California who completely ignore our immigration laws, who have sanctuary cities, who use taxpayer dollars to welcome illegals into their state, and that gives them more electoral college votes with what Joe Biden did yesterday by executive order. It's something that the Republicans on the House Oversight Committee have been adamantly against for over a year now.
Yeah, because, for instance, those 3 seats in California also say they take away from a conservative red state. That is congressional seats. That is votes for speaker. Those types of things can determine who controls the Congress, whether it's Republican or Democratic controlled.
Exactly. Nancy Pelosi won speaker's race by 4 votes. There are 3 right there in California, 3 votes that if you refigured the census based on legal citizens, then that would have been, you know, the difference possibly in Nancy Pelosi being elected speaker. And when you look at the states that are affected, because California has these 3 extra congressional seats, you're going to see states like Alabama and West Virginia that are good conservative states, Bible Belt states, that are going to lose congressional seats.
Right.
So they're being punished because they abide by our immigration laws. but states like California that completely disregard them are going to be rewarded.
So will he be successful in doing that this late in the game after the census has already been taken?
I fear he will, because the census director, Dillingham, the one that President Trump appointed, he resigned this week. And, unfortunately, a lot of the Trump administration, they've kind of folded up and headed out. And it's very unfortunate, because the last thing that those of us from Congress want to see are the blue liberal states that are completely turning their nose to the Constitution, completely doing things on a daily basis to attract illegals into this country. They get rewarded with this census congressional reapportionment, and we get punished. It's just not fair.
Yeah, I would think that could be open to litigation. Some of the states could, because this affects the states, the funding, their representation in Congress, and maybe some of the states could engage in some legal activity here to possibly challenge that executive order. A couple of other things involving national security: abolishing the ban on those traveling from countries that are known for terrorism. He's reversed that order by President Trump. Also halted construction on the border wall that keeps our southern border safe. But one of the last ones he did late last night, was this issue of so-called banning discrimination against LGBT employees. This actually amends the Civil Rights Act, or basically tells federal agencies, contractors, that as it pertains to the Civil Rights Act of 1964, you have to treat sexual orientation and gender identity as if it were under the term sex.
It's just a win for political correctness and a loss for common sense, a loss for national security, a loss for Christian liberty. And I don't know what else to say other than elections have consequences.
They sure do.
And we knew that Biden was going to speak out of one side of his mouth about unity, and the other side he was going to enact every executive order that the radical liberal left wanted, and that's unfortunately what he's done in his first 2 days in office.
Yeah, when I talk about unity, it's unity if you conform to their policy objectives and ideology. That's the only way you get unity. I want to, Congressman Comer, I want to switch gears for just a moment, because as the ranking member on the House Oversight Committee, you sent a letter recently to the chairwoman of the committee, because she. It was really extraordinary action she took in writing a letter to the president, CEO of Hyatt Hotels, basically saying you need to look at who's staying in your hotels and check out to see whether they're conservative insurrectionists. We don't want them in Washington, D.C. It appears that the Democratic Party are trying to turn business owners into snoopers for the left.
That's exactly what they're trying to do. And if Republicans try to do that, they might call that racial profiling. And it's just very unfortunate that the Democrats continue to lead a full-on assault on the private sector. It's not the private sector's responsibility to police their customers to determine whether they are politically correct or not, whether they believe in the Democrat ideology of political correctness. And that's what the Democrats in Congress and Chairwoman Maloney have clearly tried to do with this letter. It opens these businesses up to even more liability. We've tried as Republicans to pass liability protection for businesses because of COVID. They've been adamantly opposed to that because the trial attorneys don't want that. And now they're going to further expose these big businesses and employers to more liability. It's very disappointing.
So how do they expect the business owners to determine the motives of people staying in their hotels? I mean, I don't know, how do they do that?
Right. Typical knee-jerk reaction by the Democrats. They don't own businesses. They've never made payrolls. They don't understand the struggles that everyday small business owners, large business owners go through. And if they did, they wouldn't pass more regulations all the time and do things to hinder the private sector, because the biggest issue for Republican and Democrat voters is always the economy and trying to get the economy reopened after COVID. But it's hard when you've got Democrat leaders in Congress that do things to private business, like what Maloney's doing, and asking them to police their customers to determine what their intent is on staying in their hotels. It makes no sense.
It doesn't, but it does make sense if you look at government as the big brother. And
Right.
I'm afraid that may be exactly where we are. Congressman James Comer, thanks so much for joining us today and for speaking out on a number of these issues. Good to talk with you.
Always good to talk to you. Thanks.